Support for this program provided by
Hello fellow woodchopperoos, Chad here, and on today's episode of Wood Chopping Time, I am going to show you how to carve one of these cute little rosettes. Now, let me say right up front that I am not a professionally trained carver. I just do it as the job is required by my clients or just for fun, and I find this to be a fun little project to do. Now, the tools that I will be using are the Pfiel chisels, carving chisels. I have 6 of those. I have one Japanese style chisel and a flex cut chip carving knife. All of these are available at a woodcraft store near you or Woodcraft online. Okay, now real quick, let me talk to you about a chisel. There are 2 sets of numbers on here. The first number is kind of like the family, the sweep or the curve of it. And the second number is the millimeters of how wide the chisel is. So you can get hundreds of chisels built up in your collection. But fortunately for you, I've narrowed it down to these 7. Now the wood that I'm using is basswood. And basswood is a straight grained clear wood. It's very soft, so it's very nice to carve with. You could also use walnut or mahogany. Now you could use pine if you don't have access to those woods, but I find pine tends to tear a little bit more for me, and I don't get quite as clean or smooth of cuts that I would like. But at any rate, this is all about fun. Okay, so let's get into it. Now, normally when I carve, I don't bother to lay much out. I have a couple of reference lines and I go from there. But I started thinking, because this is probably your first time doing a rosette, that you would feel better with some kind of pattern or template to work from. So I should have this pattern available to you online at woodchoppingtime.com, free to download. However, if you're watching this and it's not there, well, I'm going to leave it up a second so you can do a screenshot and probably save it that way. Alright, so let's get into it. As you noticed, I have 3 cameras rolling here, so I'm trying to get as much of the action down here for you to see. But bear with me because my hands might get in the way. Alright, the first chisel I'm going to be working with is the 7-6. And what this is going to do is I need to establish the button for this rosette. And if you'll notice that the wood dishes down to that button. So that's what I first want to start clearing out. Now, as I put my chisel on the wood, it's tempting to hold the chisel straight. But because there's a bevel on the bottom of this, that would be okay maybe for my first time around to just stake the shape. But if I keep doing that, what's going to happen, this bevel is actually going to undercut into the wood, and then this button will pop it right out. So what I do is I try to hold not the chisel, but I try to hold the bevel so that is going straight up and down. And then I will stake this in. And this is such a soft wood, I don't have to do it real hard. In fact, I could probably just press on it with my body, my shoulder. Not doing much the first time around, just real light. Alright, now I want to remove some of this waste, and you can see I have 3 different circles here that I'm working with, and I'm going to be using 3 different chisels. So I'm still working with this 7/6. Now it feels tempting to just go down and scoop into the wood like such and try and pull it out. But what I like to do is I like to do this like shearing or slicing motion. So what I'll do is I'll start, and you'll notice, see how I'm kind of going on an angle, and then I'm rotating my wrist around, and I'm trying to produce a curl or a shaving out of this. There we go. All right, now I need it to go deeper, so I'm going to do the same thing again. This time I'm just going to lean on it. And I like to bring my shoulder up to my wrist so I can get my weight behind it. And I'm going to try and take a little bit more of that shaving out. So the front edge of the chisel is not moving a whole lot. It's mostly up here in my wrist as I'm making a slicing motion with it. Okay. The reason I like to do that curving and slicing motion, because if I just keep digging down on it, sometimes there's a chance that as you come through and the fibers release, you can create too much pressure and knock that button right off. Okay, so now I'm moving to a 7F14, and I'm going to continue that same sweeping, slicing motion, and you'll notice, see, I'm going up to that first pencil line. That first pencil line is about 1/2 inch from the center. The button itself is 3/16 from the center, which will produce us a 3/8 inch size button when we're done. And working with the chisel, it's a controlled means of using it. What I mean by that is that my back hand is doing the pushing and the front hand is braced on the bench, also on the work, and it's acting like the brake. So as this hand is pushing, this hand is actually resisting. Okay. Get some of these loose fibers out. All right, we're doing pretty good there. Now I'm switching to a 5/16, and this again is going to be from the center out to this outer circle. That's 3/4 of an inch. And I'm going to do the same thing, try to do that sweeping, and then I'm going to try and clean it up, get it as smooth as I possibly can. And you'll notice I have this platform, so it's up a little bit for me. It's not my regular bench height, because I don't want to be leaning over and hurting my neck or back. This is probably one of the hardest parts of the carving, is doing this here. Okay, so now I want to try and smooth that out. So I will do like the scooping action on it. And again, work it very slow. Don't apply a lot of pressure. I don't want to bust that button off. That looks pretty good. The next thing I want to establish is I want to make these little edges of the flower petals. So I'm going to make that next. And to do that, you can see I have a couple of marks here. These are from this center line, that's 3/16, another 3/16. And you need to imagine that this line here gets transferred down, okay? I also have a line going across here. That's 1/4 inch from the edge. This overall size of the rosette is 2.5 inches. So, the chisel I'll be using to establish the small petals is a 5F8. Now what I'm doing with it is I am going to go from this corner up to that first pencil mark, but I'm not pushing straight down on it. Actually, I want to push in on an angle because I want this in here to be deeper than out here. So I do that by an angle. And again, I use my shoulder. I lean forward on my shoulder and push down with it. And then I'm going to rotate this and do all 4 of them that way. Okay. Now I'm going to turn the chisel over, go the other direction. Same thing, putting the one corner in deeper than the others. And of course, when you're going with the grain of the wood, it goes in real easy, and when you're going against the grain, it's harder. Okay, now I'm coming down to this point. Same thing. Go all the way around. And then, of course, our last one. So it looks like we've just made the golden arches an M for McDonald's. All right, that established the smaller petals. Let's work on the outer shape here for this larger petal, and that is a F714. And again, I'm doing the same thing. I'm starting at this corner, and I'm going to work up to the line here. And because this chisel's bigger, it takes a little bit more effort to push it in. And you can see how this goes pretty quick. Once you learn this order and this pattern, it's pretty fast. All right, we'll do the other side. Okay. Now I want to work on removing the waste here. So let's look at our original one. I want to take this out. I also want to establish like a border line all the way around this. So what I do is I use this large chisel. It's a 140. It looks like E. It's real small there. It looks like an E, but it's a 140, I believe, E. And with the bevel facing to the inside of the work here, I come to this corner and I'm going to act like a guillotine now. I'm going to push this corner in deep and then work it up, kind of like slicing. And you'll see it just goes past halfway, but I'll do that all the way around. It's a nice controlled push and lean to it. I can easily guide it right on that line. Okay, and now I have to come the other direction, because like I said, I only cut just over halfway. And the same thing. Push down into it, up into that corner. Lean it forward. You'll notice I'm using my shoulder on the top of the chisel to really put a lot of pressure. You want to make sure your chisels are nice and sharp for this. Otherwise you wind up crushing fibers instead of slicing them. Now, while I still have this chisel out, this is a little detail I just like to add. If you look real faint, you can see a line coming off of the center here. I like to throw that in. You can't really see it when it's carved, but if you were to add stain to this, it would soak in deeper there and just give you a little bit more accent. So, even though I chiseled away most of my line, or carved it out, I'm going to put this back in for you all. So same thing, I'll put my chisel in down here and give me a nice little defined line in it. Okay, so let me set this one aside. And now here's where I come to my flex cut chip carving knife, because what I'm working on doing is removing this. So one more time, we know we're deeper in this corner and it kind of bevels or angles out at that point right in here. So the chip carving knife is coming in on an angle, and I'm just cutting down to it, and see, real easy, like the pieces should pop out as long as I, with my chisel, made them deep enough. If they're not deep enough, no problem, just go back in with your chisel, or sometimes you can even dig it out with the chip carving knife, like that one right there. I'm just gonna put the knife in. I probably just missed a couple of fibers. You don't want to try and pry it out. It should easily come out. See that's stuck. Something's stuck there. There we go. Try this next one. Going across the grain is a little bit harder than going with it. Those came out real nice. Time, something stuck. Okay. Not too bad. Starting to look like our rosette. Now what I want to do is I want to start dishing in each one of these petals. And what I do with that is, that's where I use this Japanese chisel. I believe the sweep on it is like the 6. I'm sorry, like the 7-6. I used to use the 7-6 to dish out the petals. But I found that this Japanese chisel, see if I can get a picture for it here on the camera. The Japanese chisel just has some bigger walls to it. It goes up higher on the side than the other one. And with that going up higher on the sides, it allows me to get in deeper. If you try and go in too deep and the walls are shallow, you start tearing the wood. So by this being really curved, it usually gives me a pretty good cut. Now, I always do these longer petals first. And so I'll start at the edge, and again, notice how I'm holding it. This hand is coming up on the back of the handle, and I'm pushing down, so it's like straight with my arm. The other hand, the wrist is on the work, on the bench and on the workpiece, and I'm controlling like the brake to it. And then you got to be careful when you get down to the button. You don't want to get too much momentum going and bust that button off. We went through all that trouble to make it look so nice. We don't want to lose it. And if it doesn't want to come up, just, once again, stake a little bit around that button, just cut the fibers, and it'll come out. And I'm going to do the remaining 3. The bevel on the bottom of the chisel allows you to kind of steer your work. So if you feel it's going in too much, just ease up and push down. It'll come out. If you want to go in deeper, you go up a little bit higher. Okay. The longer petals are done. Now I'm going to move to the smaller ones. Boy, that's looking nice. Real nice. The next chisel I'm going to use is this Vayner chisel. It's an 11-4. This is real narrow. And all I'm doing with this one is just on the longer petals here, I just want to put a slightly deeper groove in it. I just want to make them a little bit more distinguishable from the smaller ones. And I'll do the same thing. You can see how fine of a little shaving that takes. You could do all the petals this way, but like I said, I just like to do the longer ones. I think it adds just a little bit of variation from the others. The button at this point, the button looks a little too square at the top. We want to round it over to give it a softer look. To do that, I'm going back to the 5F8, and I'm now turning it upside down, I want to be making sure I'm working with the grain, going with the grain of the wood here. And the back edge, I'm going to try and knock and round off. So I'll start on the edges here, try and curve those, and then I'm going to try and curve that back side. And this is where you want to go real small, real light with it, because you can easily tear that out or take a big chunk and ruin the look of your button. Very small shavings, not much. All right, I'm going to turn it all the way around. Once again, working with the grain. Do the same thing. And it's good to take as little as you can. You can always make multiple passes to take more off. But if you try and take too much at once, you'll fracture the wood and bust something out. Final little detail, I would say you're like 99% done, and most people would probably walk away at this point, but the last little detail I like to do, let's look at my original one here, right in between the small tiny little petals, I will take my chip carving knife again and just sink that in deeper. Just make it a little bit deeper. Again, a slight variation from the other petals on it. I wiggle the knife back and forth just a little bit to help separate those wood fibers. And again, when you stain it, put that in there, it'll really look nice. And there you are, a little bit of sanding to get your pencil marks off, and you have another beautiful little rosette to add to your collection, your knowledge and your skill of woodworking. Well, I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, please share it, like it, and subscribe to our show. We try to have 3 videos a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And of course, as always, keep on dancing.